But this is what I wanted to talk about here is Saturn in Aquarius squaring Uranus and Taurus. So this is where I see a big change in our food supply and agricultural system. So basically what's going on right now, is that because of these shutdowns of major manufacturing like plants, like packaging plants and things like that, and because of the way things are set up where it's all very centralized, and because of the whole COVID-19 thing in general, and restaurants being shut down and schools being shut down, there's been a shift in the supply chain and where it's been going and how it's being distributed. And so there's enough food, but it's not going places. And this is because the system that we have right now is not functional in the way that it should be. And this system actually was created in a very specific time frame, where I'm going to talk about this in kind of the next slide here. And let me actually just jump to that real quick. So basically, the current agricultural system was created last time Jupiter in Aquarius squared Uranus in Taurus, which I thought was very interesting. So after the onset of the Great Depression, while Uranus was in Taurus, after we had the Dust Bowl here in the United States, and there was food shortages and famine and a huge, obviously, economic collapse, the Great Depression, there was a major change in the way that agriculture was done, especially on a grand scale. And so there was a couple different things here, but the main thing that happened was technology improved, where they were using much bigger and better machinery and much better advancements in technology to produce more. Also, they created new hybrid crops and livestock that were, again, able to produce more. It was quantity over quality because they wanted to make sure that people were fed. The other thing too was that they started to invest in things like pesticides. And so there was a lot of new pesticides and herbicides and fertilizers that were made from different synthetic chemicals that were put on the market. And the biggest thing that changed the agricultural system from what it was, which was a little bit more small scale, to like these large scale industrial farms where they're monocropping and everything becomes centralized. The main shift in that direction was because there were direct government subsidies that would support certain types of agriculture and certain agricultural technology research. And that's still to this day, like these big giant farms, they get a lot of subsidies, a lot of research is paid for and funded by the United States government and by other governments across other countries throughout the world. And a lot of this research is geared toward doing things in a way that's unnatural in order to produce as much food as possible to feed as many humans as possible. And it's all centralized, it's all giant. And right now what we're seeing actually, and this is an expansion of this, right? It's like overdoing it with Jupiter. Jupiter in square overdoes things. Too much of this, right? Too much, making way too much food like in one location instead of like in like little pockets, it's all in one place. That to me is a very Jupiter thing. And so that's kind of where we're at right now, is we're coming to this point where we're going to have that exact same square, but also Saturn's involved, right? And so Saturn square Uranus brings some sort of economic recession or similar difficulties. There's usually some sort of economic disruption when Saturn squares Uranus. It brings about change in your personal life that you're resistant to, and it delays and creates challenges to the changes that you personally desire. And so this is going to be a time where a lot of people are going to be wanting to make big, massive changes to their career path. And it's not necessarily going to happen all at once, or it's not going to be exactly what they want. And so you'll get the change you need, and it'll happen very slowly. The change that you want, you might get it, but it's going to take way, way longer than you want it to. And that's kind of more on a personal level what this typically will bring. The last time that we had Uranus and Aquarius squaring Saturn and Taurus was 1999 and 2000. And so this was very interesting because in early 2000, toward the end of this transit, we had the onset of the dot-com bubble. And so we had a, economic recession that occurred because of that. And this is especially interesting because this was actually with Saturn in Taurus and Uranus in Aquarius. So it was like the reversal of what we have right now. And Saturn in Taurus and Uranus in Aquarius is actually easier because Uranus loves to be in Aquarius. Saturn technically is the traditional ruler. It's okay there, but it's more on the restrictive end and the sort of looking at the traditional side of things and limitations, restrictions, all of that. As opposed to Uranus, which is a lot of innovation and a lot of, crazy stuff going on in the Aquarian world, which would be technology, the tech industry, the internet, right? Saturn in Taurus actually does a little bit better. Taurus is a fixed earth sign. Saturn creates structure and form. It's very slow moving. It's not necessarily in like how Uranus and Taurus is, they're sort of contradictory energies. Uranus wants a lot of change, innovation, excitement. Taurus wants things to stay the same. Saturn kind of wants things to stay the same too. um, it'll help you to get rid of excess, but it'll lock you into things. So that's actually an easier variation of this energy is what I'm trying to say there. So basically we have the dot-com bubble, and we also saw a lot of these like scandals on an economic level when it comes to big mega corporations. And so we had Enron and WorldCom who had these big scandals, and they were misusing their resources, and there was embezzlement and insider trading and all these things. And so because of that, in the United States, they created the Public Company Accounting Reform and Investor Protection Act, which is something that was supposedly going to help regulate and control and combat these types of situations. So investors and things like that wouldn't end up on the receiving end of like a bad deal and a bad situation due to, the corporations doing shady things. And so there was like financial reform, but it was like a smaller financial reform. I think that there is going to be financial reform that's going to be coming next year. I think there's going to be a big change in the economic system overall. I think that this is where we're going to see a lot of the things that they've been hinting at now. I think they're going to really roll out next year, including things like, more digital currency, where they can track all of your transactions a little bit more easily, things like more government subsidies and government intervention in the economy and things like that. But I especially think that this is going to be in terms of like, if there's a bubble that's going to burst, if there's a recession that's going to happen, which there already is, I think that we're in kind of stage one of this. I think that right now we're seeing the initial thing, and next year we're going to really see the repercussions of what was going on. And that's where a lot of the reform and a lot of the like long-term change is going to take place. And I think this year we're seeing the disruption to the agricultural system. And we're not going to fully see and understand the results of what that's going to create economically and when it comes to our ability to access food and things like that until next year. A big reason for that is because a lot of these farmers who have these large scale industrial farms, they borrow a lot of money, they're in a lot of debt, and it's a debt-based system basically. And so a lot of these people, if they even have like a bad couple of months or they lose some crops, they're at risk of losing their farm. And so we have on a large scale disruptions to the supply chain, the farmers not getting, the payment, the money that they are expecting to get to pay for their leases on their machinery, to pay their mortgage on their farm, to pay what they owe these large, Monsanto industrial agricultural entities for their seeds and for their chickens and for whatever it is that they need to continue to pay them for, because they're in debt to these people as well. I think we're going to see the bursting of the agricultural bubble. I think that's going to be a big thing. I think we'll see defaults, foreclosures, bankruptcy on a mass scale when it comes to industrial agriculture. That is my personal opinion. I'm not like an expert in agriculture. I'm not an expert in mundane astrology even. This is just something I do kind of more as a hobby because it's interesting to me, but it's not like my predominant thing. But I really feel like this is what's going to be happening. So where are the opportunities in all of this? The first thing, in terms of agriculture, I think that there will be an increase in government funding and subsidies in terms of new agricultural research and new research in innovations in food. the food technologies. That can look really nice for some people, and for others, it can look a little bit more sinister. It depends on your framework. If your mindset is, hey, just want everyone to be fed with something, then yeah, it could be good. But we're going to see, I think, a lot more Franken foods, a lot more GMO, synthetic, lab created meats and other foods like that are made of, God knows what, and kind of like an abomination when it comes to nature. We'll see that. But the other thing that I think we're going to see is sustainable, that's Saturn, sustainable regenerative agriculture. I think we're going to see new systems in agriculture that are looking at long term. They're looking at the long term impacts of what they're trying to create. So if you're somebody who's interested in farming, if you're somebody who wants on a smaller scale, I think that there's going to be big scale stuff going on where they're going to be subsidizing these new innovations in feeding people. But I think smaller scale and smaller pockets, people are going to be really looking toward regenerative agriculture, local supply chains, so this thing doesn't happen again, right? And people are already starting to think about these things. So growing food in your own location, if you're somebody who wants to buy land for farming, I think that farmland is probably going to be the one thing that's not going to, farmland in terms of like good organic, like small scale farming, I think that that's something that people are going to be looking for, and that I think could be a good investment. In terms of like those big monocropped, farms, a lot of those are going to be foreclosed on, and maybe those could be turned into something else, but they're usually pretty contaminated. But if you're somebody who wants to provide food, if that's your dream, you're really into like permaculture and biodynamic farming and regenerative agriculture and all these things, now's your time, because it's going to be needed. And I think that this is a system that can help replace the current system. So I think we're going to see new innovations in regenerative agriculture and in these smaller scale systems that supply really good, healthy, sustainable food for people. And I think we're also going to see the technological side of things, which can be good and bad. People will get fed that way, but based on my sort of cynical viewpoint of these types of things, I don't know that it's necessarily going to be the healthiest thing or the best thing for us. So I think we're going to see a little bit of both of those things. So those are industries where you can really look into that. Saturn square Uranus provides an opportunity for each of us on an individual level to create our own structures around career, business, use of technology, the way we connect to society as a whole. So this is a time for you to create your own structure in your work. It's not going to happen all at once. Whatever it is that you're working toward or building toward, you're going to have to make small, gradual changes, and you have to really think long term with these changes. Uranus just wants to change things. It's looking toward the future. It's like, what progress can I make? Saturn is like, how is this realistic? How does this fit within our current paradigm, our current framework? How does this fit with what traditionally has worked really well for us, right? These can work well together, but in this particular circumstance, they're challenging each other. And so we have to kind of look at both and learn to navigate these energies. We're going to have to adhere to certain structures, certain rules, regulations as we go through this process of making these changes. Treating the conventional unconventionally is a very Saturn square Uranus thing, and also a Saturn and Aquarius thing. So looking at unconventional ways to work within the current system, that's a very good thing that you can utilize in terms of like your strategies with your business or your career. Gradual sustainable change can come from this influence. Again, don't expect an overnight upheaval, and pushing for too much or change too quickly regarding your career or anything that is specific to the influence in your chart, really, it's a recipe for unnecessary complications. You're just going to end up creating a mess. So you need to make sure that what you're doing fits, it's realistic, and it's also sustainable for the long term. And usually that requires a lot more work and a lot more research prior to jumping into something. Okay. So let me look at a couple of other questions here. For self-employed business owners, do you use the natal chart of the business owner or of the business? It depends on what I'm looking at, Tamara. I would look at, if there's something wrong with their business and they're having trouble, I would look at both. If you're looking at your own personal influences, that's a little bit different. So I would primarily look at the person's chart, but if it's a specific, if you have the chart of the business and the business is having trouble and you want to shift your business, I would look at these influences in both of those things. You would want to take into account how this impacts you personally because it's your business. But if you have the business chart, then I would absolutely look at that as well. So hopefully that helps you guys who have businesses and who are smart enough to elect for a specific business launch. All right, is this only for USA? No, this is for everyone. This is for everyone. So a lot of these examples I'm giving are from the United States because that's more my knowledge base and experience. But all of these are going to impact everyone everywhere. We live in like a global society nowadays. And I think we're going to see this kind of in a lot of different places. But the examples I was giving in terms of like regulations and rules and laws and stuff, those were from the United States. And I do apologize for that. Let's see. Are blogs the way to go for writing or any other better options, stuff like podcasts, etc.? Blogs and podcasts, all of those things, anything where you can give like information in smaller bursts. I think, Luna, that's going to be an area for growth. And I think podcasts might become more popular again. Like podcasts are still popular, but they were like huge a few years ago. And then everyone shifted to video and like YouTube and stuff like that. I think there's going to be a bigger shift back to podcasts again. That's one of my predictions for this. And there might be an onslaught of like way too many podcasts, way too many. And it doesn't even have to be blogs. I think there might be something new that comes out that's like similar to that, right? Something new where you can give bite-sized pieces of information to people in little bursts. If you can create that app or you can create that system, you'll be, a millionaire by the end of this, billionaire. But something that's new and exciting where you can get that. Maybe it's like you get like 60-second clips of something, or isn't that what like TikTok and those things do? But like something where it's more educational. And you can get small bursts that you can kind of listen to or do while you're working, that type of thing, where it's like in like little bits and pieces. Okay, anyway, that was not really the question. Could it be light technology? Yeah, Velma, light technology, I think so for sure. I think that could be a big thing too. Electricity, new forms of electricity, new forms of power, right? We're looking at Saturn and Jupiter, which we'll talk about in a little bit here, in a conjunction in Aquarius. It rules electricity. So I think that could actually be a big thing as well. Okay, I feel like I'm going to move on here. What is the best business to start up? So, Maria, I'm talking about those as we go along. So the things that I'm talking about that will see growth and innovation and new things, those are the best businesses to start up in the economy as we're moving into these next couple of years. So we're kind of doing that as we go along instead of making like one big list. Film and TV industry we're talking about. Okay, so and we'll talk about the arts at the end. So that's what we're going to be doing here. One last question that I'm going to answer. So I was born in the States, but currently live in Portugal. Should I be reading my relocated chart or both? I would definitely use your birth chart as the predominant energy. The relocated chart more has to do with your specific situation in your current location. Like if you owned a business in Portugal, I would look at maybe your relocated chart and how your business is being impacted. But I don't really look at transits to the relocated chart. So it's kind of a tricky question to answer. I guess for what we're doing right now, look at your birth chart. That's my answer to that question. Okay. There's a lot of questions. Let's move on to the next thing. And then we'll get into more questions. Okay, we did Jupiter square Uranus. This is where also I think that this is going to be like a lot of opportunity when it comes to expansion of new innovative agricultural systems. It could be, again, to the point of overkill, but I think we're going to see a lot of freedom and a lot of new innovation in these areas, while at the same time seeing some restrictions, hardship, challenges, rules, regulations that we have to overcome, a lot of red tape I think, that people are going to have to overcome in order to do things more directly, or create the innovations that they want to create when it comes to the food and agricultural system. But I think that this is going to create new opportunities. Somebody was asking about, if you're in the restaurant industry, how is this going to be impacting you? I think we're going to see a lot more food trucks. That is definitely a North Node and Gemini thing. I think we're going to see much more farm to table. And I think that that's going to be a bigger thing where it's more sustainable. And I think that farm to table restaurants are not going to be impacted as much by any sort of disruption to the food supply chain, right? Because you're literally utilizing and sourcing things from local farms. Anything local, you guys. If you have a business and you have actual products, foods, items, start right now figuring out how you can source those things locally. Not only is that going to be great for your marketing because people are going to be loving that right now, but that's going to be great for you in the long term in creating a sustainable business plan where, when there are disruptions to the supply chain, which there probably will be on and off in the future, when there are disruptions to the supply chain, that won't impact your ability to do business. If you have your own local source of everything you need to create what you need to create to sell, then you're not going to, it doesn't matter if there's no shipments coming from China or from this place or from that place or from Mexico or wherever. It doesn't matter if your avocados come from California and you're on the East Coast. Like, you won't have that problem because you won't have things coming from those places. You'll be sustainable in terms of like having things that are produced locally. So start looking at, if you are a restaurant, if you own a restaurant, first thing you should shift into, if your doors are still open and you're able to, navigate that huge hit that we just took there. If you're able to navigate that, start looking at how you can find things more sustainably in your immediate environment, locally source as much as humanly possible. Same thing goes for any brick and mortar store. The other thing that I would say is find out a way that you can deliver, right? You want to have a delivery service for your food. And it's not just like last, spur of the moment, like everything's shut down because of COVID. I have to figure out how I can deliver things to people and let people know. You want to already have that there, right? So people are already getting things delivered from your store and from your business. They know it's there. They've already been doing it before there's some sort of disruption or shutdown or whatever. And that way, if you do need to close your doors for whatever reason, you have a backup plan. You're delivering food to people from a food truck or something like that, or you already have a delivery service that is set in motion. So you're using your kitchen at least, but there's not people sitting at the tables, right? These are things that you would probably already be thinking about if you own a restaurant or if you're in the restaurant industry. But if you want to invest in something, invest in like a delivery truck. Invest in something that you can use to deliver goods, services, whatever it is that you have to the people in their homes, or to do it, off-site. And definitely have an online infrastructure and make it very, very, very well known that you exist, that you deliver things, that everything is sourced locally, and you have the things that people need when other people might not have them, because that's going to be your advantage for sure, especially if you have a brick and mortar store, and especially if there are massive disruptions to the supply chain, not just when it comes to food, but even like I said before, materials, like literally right now, like we have our kitchen, we're about to renovate it because of like a bunch of water damage. And the contractors are already telling me it's going to take 10 times longer than normal because actual raw materials and things like that are not being shipped and delivered in the same way that they were before. So materials, they need to come from someplace local. Wood comes from someplace local. Everything that you need to do what you need to do needs to come from someplace local. You're going to have the advantage over all of your competitors because they're not going to be able to get the things, or they're going to take 10 times longer than you, and you're going to have what they don't. So if you're a restaurant, that's a good way to do it too. So hopefully that makes sense and that answers your question. But so this is kind of what I was talking about before. The food industry is changing. The food, from how the food is grown to how we purchase it, how it's prepared, a lot of these things will become more automated and more technological. And so we'll see a lot of self-service when it comes to, especially takeout. That's already something that they've been moving into. This is going to give them the perfect excuse to like fire all their cashiers and automate everything. I think we'll probably see like robots making the food at fast food restaurants. Like it's all going to become automated. There's not going to be a person like flipping burgers and doing things. Like there's going to be someone managing it and making sure all the technology is working. And that's actually probably going to take a little bit more skill even than what we have right now in terms of just like, cashing things out and all of that, you're going to have to understand technology. And that's where education, if you're going to get an education, do something probably technological, involving computers, involving science, involving something like that. But that's where I think there's going to be growth, because there's going to be all this new technology coming out, and someone's going to have to teach someone how to use it, right? And someone's going to have to develop it. But I think that things are going to become automated. I think the other thing too is that apps for like purchasing groceries and purchasing groceries online, that was something that was tinkered with a little bit over the last few years, and now they started trying to do that a little bit more with like Instacart and Amazon combining with Whole Foods and all of that, and it worked, but it didn't during this time when there's like a lot of food shortages and like a lot of shortages of just things that we needed and all of that, and they try to just kind of rush into it. I think that these technologies are going to be refined and expanded on, and I think that a lot of the way that we go about interacting with food is going to be more automated and less personal. I don't think that that means there's going to be no restaurants and no chefs and no, people doing this in that industry. Just when it comes to convenience and convenience foods and things like that, and even more convenient ways of shopping for groceries, I think that that's probably going to be a little bit of a thing. Not my favorite thing. I'm not saying that I'm advocating for that, but it seems like the direction we're heading into, and that Jupiter square Uranus and Taurus, it's technology around food, and that's on all levels. So we might see too much of that, too much of what a lot of people will think is a good thing. I don't have to ever leave my house. I push a button, food comes to me. Wonderful, right? maybe wonderful for some people. And if you're somebody who has like limited mobility, I think that this is actually really great. And I think that this is something that's needed. I think there are a lot of people that can't get the goods and services and things that they need very easily because they're stuck at home because they have some sort of disability or illness. I think that this is good for those types of people. And there should be an infrastructure for that in place already, but there's really not. So it's helpful. You can look at it from a lot of different perspectives. Okay, so Jupiter square Uranus, this is where we get into some of the things that we're going to be talking about here with a lot of people are asking about astrology and alternative fields and things like that. Someone I think asked about energy medicine. I think that that's definitely a very Uranus and Taurus thing. And with that Jupiter Uranus energy, I think that that could definitely be something that we see an influx in. Very literally technological, like energy medicine, like alternative medicine that uses like technology for like producing forms of energy, like Rife machines and microcurrents and things like that. I think we'll see more of those types of devices, like medical devices, especially alternative medical devices. We're going to see a lot more of that. And we're also going to see a lot more heavy-handed regulation around it. But even like energy medicine, like, I give you like I do the energy medicine with my body and my energy or whatever, that kind of thing. Well, I think we'll see more of that, but also again, regulations on it. Like who's allowed to call themselves a healer? Who's allowed to do these types of things? That's going to be something that's going to be called into question as we see more of these technologies and more of these types of healers and things like that sort of entering into the market. So this is Jupiter square Uranus is actually a great energy for all things alternative to the mainstream. It can be great for the field of astrology. And I think that this is actually going to contradict some of the heavier Saturn energies, because Saturn moving into Aquarius is not great for things that are alternative. It's not great for freedom. It's not great for astrologers, which are ruled by Aquarius. One of the things that I predicted with Uranus or Saturn moving into Aquarius that happened pretty quickly after that, we started to see the taste of what Saturn and Aquarius was going to bring, was that there could be increased restrictions or censorship or like ridicule even, because that's the way that astrologers have been censored throughout history, is predominantly through ridicule, disinformation, writing us off as being crazy and ridiculous and all of these types of things. There have been periods where, astrologers were very literally publicly tortured, right? That happened because the Catholic Church did it back during the fall of the Roman Empire, because they very literally said that astrology was a threat to Christianity. And so they burned our libraries, they tortured astrologers, and I mean, that didn't stop us. So it set set us back a few hundred years in terms of like developments in astrology, but it didn't stop us. So I don't think that making fun of us some more in the New York Times, or doing more disinformation, or deplatforming, or demonetizing, our YouTube channels, and censoring us on email lists for some reason. That was a weird thing that I had to go through. I don't think that that's going to stop anything. But I think that things that are alternative are going to be expanded on. I think that things that are rebellious and different from the mainstream are going to become much, much, much more popular. People are going to want to rebel against the current system. They're going to want to try new things. And I think that the alternative media will be expanded on, but it'll also be censored at the same time. And so when we look at Saturn and Aquarius, that is internet censorship. However, Jupiter, I think, can actually create some positive potentials and opportunities out of this. And so we'll see a combination of Jupiter and Saturn things. We'll see Jupiter expanding on the use of the internet. We'll see Jupiter expanding on opportunities for online businesses and for new technologies. But we'll also see Saturn saying, hey, you can't just do whatever you want. The government needs to be involved in this. I want to tax this. I want to regulate it. You need a certificate for this. We'll see a lot of that. We'll see a lot of social media deplatforming and censorship on social media, but I think we'll also see a lot of alternatives developed between the North Node in Gemini, which is excellent for, I think one of the last time we had North Node in Gemini, it might have been when MySpace was created. So that was like the birth of social media. I think that, or maybe that was when Saturn was in Aquarius. No, that was MySpace. That was North Node in Gemini. The other thing too, though, is that Aquarius energy, I mean, there's going to be censorship, but I think between the North Node in Gemini and between Jupiter in Aquarius, I think we're going to see a lot of opportunity as well. There's going to be a lot of expansion, a lot of new crazy developments. I think it's going to grow rapidly, and it's going to be faster than people can really regulate and squash. So I think there's going to be like this mad dash to create all of these new alternatives, and there's going to be a lot of shutting down of those alternatives as we go along, but they're not going to be able to stop it. This is something that's being expanded on in a lot of different ways. So I think that's going to help to kind of contradict that energy. This is going to bring, like I said before, innovation in science, technology, internet-based services. Those working in the tech industry are probably going to benefit really greatly from this alignment, especially if you are somebody who works for like a startup or a corporation or something where there's some sort of structure or hierarchy. But even you, like working independently, as long as you're working within the current paradigm, but also kind of doing your own thing in your own way in the tech industry, I think that you can do that. This is a great time for, there's like a kind of a tech bubble right now, but I don't think it's going to burst. I think that this is actually going to almost strengthen things and make it so it's like out of control. And so this is going to be, let's see, what else did I not mention about this? Yes, so this is going to be a focus on sustainable growth in these industries. So I think we're going to see huge advancements, but again, it's going to be like, can we sustain this? Is this actually good for society in the long term? What is this going to look like in terms of restrictions on our freedoms and things like that? Is this like a moral thing to do? Does this benefit humanity even? Like that's going to be part of the question, I think, with a lot of the new technologies that we're seeing. Also, between this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius and the North Node in Gemini, I feel like self-driving cars are going to be a big thing. I think ride shares are going to be less of a thing. I think people are going to either want to, I'm seeing a lot of these like Carvana things where like you order a car and it comes to you. I think in terms of actually like going places instead of like Uber, I think there's going to be more like, well, there'll be Uber, but it'll be like a self-driving car, or like where you pick up your car. There's like different locations where you go and you pick up your car and, you drive it around and you leave it in one of the designated spots for it. I don't know if that's still a thing in the cities, but that was something that was kind of a new thing in Chicago when I lived there like 8-9 years ago. I think we'll see more stuff like that. I don't know that it's going to be as, it's going to be app-based and things like that, but I don't think it's going to be as interactive. Good or bad, I don't know. So people are going to be looking to expand their freedom and independence amidst increased government intervention. I think astrology is going to continue to grow, but I think we're going to see more of a blowback and a pushback. And I think that's going to be the same with all things that are alternative, different, rebellious, outside of the norm, viewed as unusual or eccentric. So I think there's opportunity, but you have to just be cautious and careful because you might have some hoops to jump through, and you might have some bureaucracy, some red tape, or even some censorship to deal with. So thinking ahead about how you can navigate that in the coming years, if that's the industry that you're in, it's a good time to start that. So looking to alternative platforms, looking to have a backup plan if there are more regulations in your field, or if you do get censored in some way.